Hell of Occupy Democrats YouTube channel has criminally foreign influence and tactically delusions wrought information, including with Congressman Larson and Doge. The FBI, former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, has increasingly collusion with people associated with the names Joshua Julian and a Joshua Stryker and a Joshua Schumack with Weathersfield police and with courts switching and forging names, with child offenders, including sexual and medical, all kinds of corruption with the state judicial branch offices, corrections offices. These are also people involved with overt criminal enterprises per themselves, and through decades, roles with Afghan leaders and kids with the Weathersfield town offices and people with the Weathersfield police phones where they are now and where they used to be. They used to be near the Weathersfield town offices. And also people next to them through time are ones involved with predicate acts, intercities and intra-cities, and with campuses, identity theft, fraud, slanders. There's a Kevin, there's a Mike Domain and Adam Domain. There are two Mendez police next to Fox Connecticut News, also with Allison Mulcahy, involved also with her neighbors, involved with a former with Thaddeus Grabowski, who was one of the co-defendants, a former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, former standing chairperson on the Racketeering Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. They have the courts and on off the state judicial branch offices and the corrections offices and the prisons tied to them and their campuses. Their family members have been roles of predicate acts with fax methods recorded at and next to the campuses, intercities and intra-cities connected. I have I had an algebra teacher when I was a sophomore involved with arrested me right at school. Came and took me out of the school. They have roles increasingly with people around all along Route 175, which goes by right from founding locations, and with the Route 3, which goes by the state of Connecticut judicial branch offices. And like, for example, next to it is a Weathersfield, not far from it is a Weathersfield Pizza House. They have wire crime acts and methods with the forensics names and state police families and their educators involved with them with identity thefts and frauds, and with the child offenders, leaders of the kids, with more names involved. There is the name Fazina further involved with Maria Fazina and Stephen Stocco with wire crimes of the Weathersfield police refusing to identify themselves legitimately. Someone with the last name Larson, a nice kid. I barely had communications with him, and a Mike Domain and Anthony Agman were in my class with me. We're like the only ones in the algebra class with a Jewish per her and per domain, a Mike Domain. They repeated sexual things about my neighbor and that she was Jewish, and I didn't respond to it, and I didn't know who Mike Domain was. But he's tied to people I found out who live near me who used to, like, there's a Mike, Paul Zano. I never really saw him around my neighbors, but every once in a while, the only time I was even, he would appear for a second and say stuff about Jew themed. They have roles with lobbyists, apparently Jewish too. I don't know, because of the Jewish themed roles with predicate acts with them. They have Weathersfield police refusing to identify themselves with confessions over the phone too. Also in the form of where they use crime methods, inter-police forms, and the foreign at the same time. They switch and forge names. A Scalora family is increasingly involved with the ones named DeMoro and Colo on, off, and next to the state corrections offices, including with I never saw them around a Lance Cuddy. I don't know Lance Cuddy. I never had a word of conversation with Lance Cuddy. He's involved with federal evidences crimes per a whole bunch of people tied to him when I was a kid, made confessions tied to him. And then when I was an adult, also Lena's Pizza recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with them with roles with investigators, used remotely, criminally foreign influenced. And then that uses the rest of them more and more. They're only capable of being self-valued, being and haven't been used remotely, criminally foreign influenced. There are former mayors from Weathersfield increasingly involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders to me, against me, attaching everyone I know, and lying to my family members about me too. And they won't get on paper interbranch since I was a kid. The same ones involved with a whole bunch of different countries. There are proofs that a gold family has roles with with the people from Venezuela and the people from Russia, and like where they talk about politics as collusions against themselves and against, like, there's another side besides A through Z since semi-ancient times. There are proofs, you know, that we need to address this, even if it's not real. It's more, for example, in the communications of James Madison's and of our founders, they replaced the scientific value of the human fact treating nature breaching method that prevented everyone from free speech and made them pretend other, while it had their speech as collusion/s against others to an extent. Otherwise, that body would be censed, including if that body was a majority of people, including if it was everyone. That's really why and how the North and South both had roles with slavery. That's really why and how we have like Harriet Beecher Stowe, you know, really our hero, but also partially forced to be our hero, where all sides are all differences are collusion/s yet still. They're using it to screen how the North and South had collusions with the breaching method, with the slavery had nothing to do with it. All truths like money, that was used to measure and maintain the breaching method's roles with it left out. The breaching method, we could discern how slavery was left entrenched, even though our founders didn't want it. We have this discernment replaced because of how we have at each age of fact treating nature, what nature communicates to us, and what our founders communicated to us that we are capable of understanding. We have those understandings replaced. In other words, so there were people who spied on me when I was in kindergarten, and then they spread lies when I was in second and third grade. I don't even know who they were, and they were just quick instances, something to do with the Earth Day too, and former Mayor Gold, but also other former mayors. They increasingly have lie progressions and time cover-ups years apart with people that pretend to fake things in databases. I caught them with a principal upskirt nature, a principal being, who's also involved with a bunch of the security associated with like a domain family, and in other words, and the Mendez police. There are Mendez police that put me in fake conversations with the police roles when they were kids, and then as an adults at the Wethersfield police station. And the kids who did go down there and speak with them, they have roles with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and identity theft, fraud, slanders, make a fake exception of knowing me, pretend I had conversations just because I was in the car with the Christopher Walters. Increasingly, people tied to a Christopher Walters and a Mike Pandoff, and the people involved with that sophomore class, they hid what I recorded when I was a freshman. In other words, and before that, each year they're putting predicate acts in databases between campuses, and with private school kids, they're putting them roles with the predicate acts with kids that aren't even connected to each other on the campuses, just they're in the same grade. They have 2 speech class teachers I have. Never had a personal conversation with them. They're increasingly involved with relative Washington, D.C. and World Trade Center predicate acts and predicate acts methods and corruption, all kinds of medical corruption involved with them and with their sources. You know, in other words, and they won't get out to paper. These are also people all along Route 175 from founding locations where George Washington had to come to counter-extort roles with worse than just slavery against everyone, sickly distinctly, but with black in the syntax, northern colonies and southern colonies, sickly distinctly. We're supposed to understand this. We're supposed to understand that our founders had to force both the North and South to fight against slavery. But the second they would do it syntactically, they would be censed. So they had to make them fight with themselves and pretend all kinds of different motivations and things like that. And they had real motivations to blame things on, because our founders' plan behind James Madison, the ones that went to go to George Washington. George Washington, he was only one general. He didn't have the strength to fight against that which had a whole bunch of internationally monitored conversations and countries' roles with private criminal enterprises overt criminal enterprises, terrorism, the branches of government, witch trials, role, the difference of them roles or the overt criminal, just criminal and insidious nature itself was propagated with the positive treatments and the negative treatments syntactically. All kinds of behavior racketeering, worse than war crimes. I saw titles of videos I didn't watch on YouTube about Elon Musk crying. I cried in a YouTube video, but not for the reasons that the interbranch could afford to discern. They've been stealing my identity. They start fights. They have the interbranch differences. They have people of all kinds of differences, including their sexual preferences. And they have roles with location /S in the ground. And they're starting fights between people. If they don't respond, they do that too. They're just identity theft, fraud, slanders. How could they still be speaking about slavery, leaving out black people's whites of eyes? In other words, so there's a Miss Riley, further involved with people with the name Riley with the Board of Education. And next to the Board of Education building are increasingly people involved with overt criminal enterprises and private ones. And the former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin. There are people with the name Apted at Hartford Hospital. I only know Paul Apted. I never had a conversation with Paul Apted in my life. There are proofs that they took a picture of me standing outside of a bar on Franklin Avenue next to him. He has roles with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, per Hartford Hospital, and per their sources, and per their roles with houses and businesses next to the Hartford Hospital's campus, and next to child campuses there too, as roles with the names there, who are also collusion /S with names next to campuses intercities, who are also roles with predicate acts with facts into the databases at campuses. And you guys don't follow mandated law, and you've been fabricating transcripts with the courts. You guys have been collusion /S stacking fake things into courts, intercities, with Wethersfield interbranch and intelligence tied to them. And at the same time, with a whole bunch of different countries in the news, and increasingly people on Dearborn Street in conjunctions to it in Newington, Connecticut, are recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with their educators with predicate acts and facts against me from people off the campuses. It's also not personal against them. They'll tell you this if you ask them correctly. It was also recorded. In other words, increasingly there are judges and prosecutors who have been planting evidences with names that had conversations with my educators behind my back. And these are still ones like next to campuses who have needs to cover up life progressions. They have roles with untimely deaths at Trinity College and people on my street from other areas tied to them who had roles with that, also forced by the Wethersfield police, who have roles with all kinds of falsified police reports in my area through time, where they have sickly distinctly against the kids and against the adults, needs to hide things. So they do that. Wethersfield police attached me to fake conversations with them as a kid, now as an adult. And one of the kids that they did have go down there and communicate with them, he's increasingly involved with people at the campuses, private and public, with identity theft, fraud, slanders, predicate acts, whole methods of them. Now they have their families reliant upon their incomes. That's why it's part of the reason they're motivated to jump into other people's conversations anyway, dishonestly. And you know how easy it is to change and fake what people say and ignore them and just make a quality of fact. Anyone could do that. That's why you have an intelligence family criminals. Anthony Yagman and Joshua Julian are involved with many directly and indirectly with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and with the courts members, like a Brian Silver is involved with New Britain Superior Court and with Connecticut's District Court, with predicate acts, also with Hartford courts and their intimate family members and ties and sources and friends and neighbors of them, involved with also predicate acts at the campuses through time. More roles with the principal upskirt nature and other sexual and medical offenders of kids, increasingly tied to the prosecutors and judges, and their roles with investigators being and having been used remotely, criminally foreign influenced. There are proofs that they had Joe DeMoro called me on the phone. And after I already recorded him with all kinds of natures of organized crime, trying to pretend he knew me and like we were friends on the phone, trying to make fake exceptions. That's one of the things they do is make fake exceptions where we have interbranch switching and forging names. And their roles with some KKK, black themed, Confederate flag themed, Italian themed, Latino themed, Korean themed, for example, other Russian, Ukraine, at the same time, and their doctors, increasingly Harvard Hospital, attached me to fake conversations with the Leahy family. There are multiple people with the name Brendan Leahy, and there are women in their family. There are ones with the name Lombardo. Whole bunch of people at Harvard Hospital tied to a Ray Cololo and a Smith family near me, involved with wire crimes with Wethersfield police refusing to identify themselves and whiting forensics since I was a kid. These are people involved with whiting forensics with state police too, with state police families interstates involved with the ones named Cololo, DeMoro, and per people tied to them too. Like Eric Jensen is also one of the ones who has planted evidence on all sides of my house and people with the area involved with them, with also with the people who have been speaking on Wethersfield government access television. They have roles with Russians, Ukraine, their own against their own, our own against our own. They have roles with psychiatry. No one's even looking in those databases. They have judges speaking fake things and delusions into databases, and their family members involved with the same house of wire medicine crime, wire mail crimes, medicines crimes, drug crimes, syntax, even on Facebook and YouTube. Ones with the name Cololo and Joshua Julian are further involved with predicate acts with little coward courts like New Britain Superior Court and the roles with the names next to the state judicial branch offices. Wethersfield Pizza recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with all kinds of federal evidence crimes in them, drugs and medicines crimes with the names of houses and businesses next to Harvard Hospital, involved with their educators too, with identity theft, fraud, slander. They lie about themselves and others. Maria Vizino and her husband, Stephen Stocco, reportedly her husband. In other words, Stephen Stocco's been making things up with Wethersfield police. I can't get him onto paper. He has wire crime acts with the various police forms and the courts involved, and their state judicial branch offices, and the state corrections offices and names next to it. In other words, you guys won't get out the paper since I was a kid. You got to get out the paper. You got to follow mandated law. You got more violence involved. There's a Phil Cololo involved with credible violent threats and people speaking through others to make it look like we had conversations verbally. So you got a Phil Cololo involved further with child sexual offenders and medical offenders, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and the family members of probate court judges. We're going to examine their roles with where people are locked into elderly homes they can't leave, and their roles with the people at the prisons, and their roles with the people at the whiting forensics, increasingly involved with crime scenes, with the people that work there, and the people next to all natures of crime scenes, including campuses, and the news at the same time to prevent people the right outcome in anything. These are people that need to value wars. That's why. In other words, it's not war. You know how many scams they have through Social Security recorded with it? In other words, all kinds of money they owe. The people that work at Harvard Hospital tied to the claw. In other words, and hoping the DeMoros and the Miles involved. In other words, John Maiano. Where does Alex Maiano live? What's your other brother's name? Marco? I never met him. No, I barely know that. In other words, make sure you tell him your family, because these are people with family with the intelligence. Sometimes it's the intelligence that has them record fake things. Sometimes it's their own selves. And then it's the difference of their families are used to remotely criminally foreign influence. All these countries had collusions here for a long time. Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut has roles with Saudis and a whole bunch of intelligence at Trinity College on Zion Street next to Trinity College and on New Britain Avenue on Trinity College. A whole bunch of people made fake ties to me, fake natures of ties to me since I was a little kid over there. As the ones planting evidences on my street, increasingly with the Wethersfield Police Department and the courts refusing to identify themselves since I was a kid. And they have extended family members involved with the World Trade Center attack location and spots next to it, including the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals next to it. And the context in the court itself put sequence shifts. And they attach it to people on both sides of that case to sequence shifts and other predicate acts against me. And they're lying about, in other words, they put me in fake conversations with that too by WFSB. They lie about the actual outcome of legal cases in the fake conversations they put me in with themselves. While they were doing that to force child abusers, plural, leaders of the kids. Only one of them has been proven since anyway. And further, they have their roles with the with shopping centers and malls too. The same ones next to the campuses sticking predicate acts with facts, and with the news increasingly. So my algebra class teacher, a Miss Riley, is involved also with men with the name Riley, and more women involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids, and into religious spot nub bags, and Jew syntax with the ones like there's a Johnson in Wales, and a Bryant University recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with people with the name Zano and Luigi Guerrero, increasingly involved with people at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut, and with Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, involved with predicate acts with them with foreign and domestic, and courts, family members, prosecutors, judges, their family members, putting fake recorded things. They have been using investigators, remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically, delusions, wrought since founding. Pounding drums. Let's get them on paper, one name and sequence. Please. You guys are little coward punks when it comes down to it. On a mass scale, they use the crime methods of pretending that people say that everyone's evil, where they have a whole bunch of people sticking fake things in databases at the same time. And with one name is increasingly planting evidences on all sides of people's houses after those predicate acts in the databases. And next to each of the campuses I went to, there are connections between those people that have been made. And those are also the ones who had time collusions with the names in the New York location /S, and ones were involved with the Washington, D.C., and increasingly involved with the World Trade Center, used remotely originally and still. Criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. Then they want to go have committees. They know they have things classified from themselves, including, in other words, a whole bunch of things that they hide lies that aren't even lies because they have a whole bunch of different countries at the campuses together, are sick fakes together, speaking about things like crimes while they are predicate acts with facts, methods, needs, and natures. All kinds of databases roles with illusions at other locations /S, collusion /S. They don't even know. Like, that's one of the reasons why and how they have even, no one wants naturally to have how we have black people's whites of eyes left out from the subject. What was slavery about? Slavery was about that torture, extortion, in fact, true nature, slavery, therefore physically against every single body standing, northern colonies and southern colonies, including if that body was a majority of people, who would syntactically counter it. In other words, there would be sense first. In other words. So mandated laws not followed on a mass scale. Russians, I am for you. These are people, and Venezuela. You have the rules with psychiatry, tactically delusions raw, criminally foreign influence, all kinds of natures of organized crime, collusion /S with all sides of criminal and civil cases, and the courts at the same time, and the police forms and their sources, including their roles with mayors increasingly too. And names next to body dumping spots relative. Yeah! Who disbelieves? Let's get them on paper. One name and see. I shouldn't have to beg you, sons of bitches. In other words, you put fake. No, I need something to respond to on paper. You're forging and switching names since I was a kid. And that's relative, where you have a Robert Rodriguez involved with some untimely deaths, with people associated with my neighbors that forced them to collusions with it. They don't even know. At Trinity College. My former neighbors, and intercities. They were planting evidences next to Central Connecticut State University, next to Trinity College, in Central Connecticut State University, in New Britain, Connecticut, Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut. They were doing that with the same people, planting evidences on my street in Wethersfield, covering up lie progressions, making it look like they have fake ties, fake natures of ties to me, like with the Robert Rodriguez, who went out of his way to make confirmations, confessions to me, then to confirm it on Facebook. Then they wipe out my Facebook page. They took 3 of my Facebook page, and the police forums in the court, the roles switching with said too, because they have collusions with communications racketeering, behavior racketeering, worse than war crimes. So get them on paper. I can't get anyone to respond for me. They put me in fake conversations with doctors I never had a word of conversation with, including ones tied to a Christina Sioka, who herself, she has criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, wrought takes on American history that have to be addressed. She has roles with sexual and medical offenders, intercities and interstates. A whole bunch of people with Miami involved with the FBI too, with intercities in Connecticut, interstate. And these are people next to next to a campus in West Hartford, Montessori school, also with people with the name Mendez involved. In other words, let's get them on paper, one name in sequence. And this Judge Killian too, delusions are all criminally foreign influence, all kinds of FCC corruption too, collusion /S with judges like that and their family members and their roles with location /S, like how he has them next to him. We have some predators with the interbranch. That, in other words, we're going to address the delusions too, Black people. It is time.